Hello, everybody, and happy new comic book day. Welcome to another episode of That's Comical. I am Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and I just want to first start off by saying thank you to everybody who came to watch, came to talk about comic books with me, Dan, and Andy. It was such a wonderful feeling to see all of you just really excited and appreciative and just really giving us good feelings to continue on for the rest of this year. I just hope that in the future you guys will come and show some more support live when we do our premieres on New Comic Book Day. And of course, I will always have that information up on Twitter. But I am excited because of the fact that it is a brand new month, and that means we're here to talk about the month that was. And of course, it's not going to be just me talking about it. Dan is back to join me. Dan, glad to have you back. I'm hoping you're ready to talk about some comics today.
Absolutely. It's awesome to be back. Awesome to talk about comics. Looking forward to all our new conversations.
Absolutely. And of course, along with having Dan back, I want to welcome each and every one of you again, and thank you all for taking the time to watch us here on That's Comical. So of course, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like as well as a comment, because we love talking to you guys about comic books. But if you want to know what's going on this channel, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you are up to date on all of our latest content. So Dan, we're going to start off with a question. I'd like to know if you could sum up the first month of 2021 in comic books in one word, what would it be?
One word. Wow, you caught me off guard on this one.
Well, you're the one in the education world, man. You should know that right off the bat.
Dude, I'm totally stumped. Let me pass this one on to you first.
Well,
then maybe I'll have a retort.
Fair enough, fair enough. I would definitely say that the word to describe January was surprising. And I think it's just because of the certain things that we're going to start discussing today, because we teased what was going to be one of our topics of conversation in the last episode. So let's just say that when it comes to DC Future State, expectations were all over the place. But to a degree, I don't know if you would agree or disagree with me in regards to that, but I definitely think that when it came to the comic collecting community, there was a lot more negativity towards DC Future State than positivity.
Oh yeah, definitely. I heard a lot of negativity. However, I think the spec market kind of drove Future State at the outset because, you know, it's introduction of new characters, first appearances, all that kind of stuff. So I think that contributed to people liking it and at the same time hating it because a lot of people were specking on it.
Yeah, and the speculators market is definitely something that we will be talking about in future videos. It's also something that affected you and I as comic book collectors in our youth, even though we actually didn't even realize it until we got a lot older and time went by. But I mean, in case you guys out there didn't really know much about what Future State was, it actually started a couple years ago with one of the major names that was part of the DC Comics higher-ups, and that was Dan DiDio. Now, that's a name that I've known for a long time because as someone who watches a lot of the DC animated original films, when they do a lot of the interviews and previews for the next film, Dan DiDio was almost in every single interview, so I knew who he was. And he was touting something for a while called 5G. 5G was basically a world where the classic names in DC Comics, including the Holy Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, they were all going to be replaced. I think, unfortunately, that's the only word to describe it, by a new wave of young heroes taking up the mantle. And it caused a lot of anger, unfortunately, because of the fact that people are saying, you know, I don't want my famous faces to be replaced, because the one thing that got people even more steamed about it was people thought that it was going to sound like it was permanent.
I know you told me this, but I also read in media outlets that AT&T, the owner of DC Comics, threatened to get rid of DC Comics if 5G wasn't successful.
Well, yeah, you are absolutely right about that. And that is a whole other conversation, because when it comes to the big two names in comic books, which is DC and Marvel, we have to remember that unfortunately these two names are tied to massive corporate entities. And the problem is, they don't really care about the comic books. They're literally always in the hot seat and ready to be put on the chopping block at any day of the week, because it's not their biggest moneymaker, unfortunately. You know, I had this conversation with my wife talking about these kinds of directions that comic book companies go in. And like I said, it usually is almost always the big two. And maybe that's just because of the fact that they've been around for so many years. They have all of this power because of the fact that they're connected to these two companies. So they literally have the ability to do whatever they want. And that's, you know, either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. There are some people that do embrace it, and I won't deny the fact that they're out there. But my wife said it best. If you wanted to create a comic book that took place a couple of years into the future, and you wanted to make a new Batman, and you wanted to make the man underneath the cape and cowl a black guy, nobody really should be upset about that, because of the fact that it's not Bruce Wayne who's under the mask. That's the reason why Miles Morales is so popular. That's the reason why Kate Bishop, Hawkeye, is so popular, because Clint Barton is still the original Hawkeye, and Peter Parker is still the original Spider-Man. So as long as those two entities are still part of the lore of said characters, people will not be upset about that. And that's why characters like Miles Morales are very popular right now. But if you're going to take Bruce Wayne and turn him into I don't know, like an Asian gay man, that's where people are going to be very upset, because you're taking Bruce Wayne and you're changing Bruce Wayne. I mean, let me ask you a question. Did you see that horrible Josh Trank Fantastic Four film?
I can say that I did not.
You should be considered one of the lucky ones. I unfortunately watched it long after it hit theaters. And even when it hit theaters, I was one of the few people that got so upset over the fact that Johnny Storm was played by a black man. Now, I love Michael B. Jordan as an actor. I truly do. But my wife actually watched the movie with me when I did. And she said, okay, they made him a black guy. No big deal. But the fact that they decided to keep Sue Storm white and make her an adopted sister to Johnny, that's where it just gets a little stupid, you know? But anyway, I'm going in the direction by saying this is what 5G was going to be. And then all of a sudden, there was the bloodbath, as they called it. All of these major higher-ups in DC got fired. And it looked like 5G was officially nowhere to be found. But Jim Lee, and Dan and I are very big fans of Jim Lee. He was one of the most well-known, most beloved writers and artists in comics in the 90s. He is the reason why X-Men #1 is one of the most popular comic books of all time to this very day. But he remained, and Dan Cherry came in, and they started talking about Future State. And people were saying, well, is this 5G? In the end, I don't know about you, I still don't know the answer if this is really what 5G was, or if Future State was ending up just being its own thing. I don't think we're ever going to know the answer, because unfortunately, they're still trying to keep it a little hush-hush.
Well, let me backtrack a little from what you said previously about a new Batman. This has already been done. I mean, we have Terry McGinnis' Batman Beyond. You remember from the cartoon?
Yes.
I mean, when we were growing up, I thought that was cool. I didn't care that they took the iconic character. Like you said, it wasn't Bruce Wayne, although Bruce Wayne was involved in the story.
Exactly. The greatest reason why Bruce Timm is so awesome is the fact that every original character that he pretty much creates ends up being part of the comic canon lore. I mean, thanks to him, we have Harley Quinn, we have Terry McGinnis, we have so many other characters in all the DC worlds that they created, and it was wonderful to know that the comic books embraced these original characters in animation. But also, Nightfall, Azrael, he was another guy who took up the Bat mantle, and he also got a whole new Bat mantle. And you know what? It was cool at first, but then we realized that I don't think that this is going to be something that's going to last forever. And obviously, we got Knight's Quest after Nightfall and Knight's End. And then, of course, Batman took the cape and cowl once again as Bruce Wayne. So Future State was inevitable. We unfortunately had to expect it. And the other thing that got people a little bit scared was the fact that there were going to be a whole new bunch of writers and artists, even some writers who were already working for DC Comics, working on brand new titles. I think some of the most well-known ones were Mariko Tamaki leaving Wonder Woman. She started to write Dark Detective. And then we had Josh Williamson, who did an amazing Flash run. He ended up writing Justice League as well as a couple of the backup stories for Dark Detective. But look, we're now officially 1 month into Future State, and I'm going to say it's not bad. Granted, there are some bad titles in there. Thankfully, I haven't read them. But I would say that everything that I have read so far ranks from okay to pretty good. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I only read, just to preface that, 3 titles. I don't have such a view on all the other titles, but I know they came out with so much stuff. In order to read everything, I don't know how you'd even do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also because one of the few things that right now, when it comes to Future State, whether it's a bad comic that people are complaining about, the one thing that a lot of people are complaining about in regards to some of these books is the price. You did pick up the next Batman, which was written by John Ridley, and you said to me that it wasn't bad. You just
I liked it. I thought the story was good.
But that $8 price tag is terrible.
Yeah, that's the drawback. The Batman story itself was good, and it's kind of hard to ruin a Batman story because Batman's Batman.
Yeah, exactly.
But the backup story, I couldn't even read the whole thing. It was just, it wasn't good.
A lot of people that I follow in the comic book community said the problem with this comic, besides the price, is the fact that we didn't get more of the next Batman. They wanted more of the next Batman. The same could be said about Mariko Tamaki's Dark Detective. I mean, there was a lot of people that were so upset about the fact that we heard that after Future State is over, she's going to be the new writer for Detective Comics. And considering the fact that Peter Tomasi had gotten Detective Comics sales numbers that title had not seen in years, to abruptly pull him off of that comic title post-Joker War and put her in his place, it was a little bit of a frustrating thing to hear. There was definitely a lot more anger than sadness because he has done some excellent work. I mean, I've read some of his Green Lantern Corps. I've read some of his New 52 and Rebirth Superman before Brian Michael Bendis took over Action Comics and Superman. He was fantastic. So I didn't understand why they decided to let Mariko Tamaki take his place. However, that being said, Dark Detective #1 was not bad. As a matter of fact, I really, really liked it. And like the next Batman, I thought that we didn't get enough of her story because the backup story, which was called Grifters, ironically based on Grifter, who was created by Jim Lee because he sold Wildstorm Corporation to DC Comics when he left Image. But that was not a good story. I could barely, I don't even think I finished the backup story, if I'm being frank.
My question is to you is, why do some characters have backup stories and other characters just have their own story in the book?
Money. That's the answer.
Like for example, Wonder Woman Yara Flor, right?
Yeah.
It was only her story. But I mean, Wonder Woman's a very popular character, so that's why I don't understand why Batman had it and not the other characters.
Well, you want to know what the truth of the matter is? I'm glad you mentioned Yara Flor as Wonder Woman, because you and I were talking about her right before Future State came up. Like, the hype was so real for her. And another character who is still very much mysterious in Red X in the Teen Titans Future State story. But they were touting this new Brazilian Wonder Woman to be DC's answer to Marvel's Miles Morales. So I think that may be the reason why she got her own book and only her own book, because they're betting the farm on her, I think. I really think so, because she's got a solo title coming out post-Future State called Wonder Girl. There is I don't remember if it's a CW or an HBO Max television series that's going to be based on her. So, yeah, they are betting a lot on her. And I will definitely say that I don't think that her first comic was the best in the bunch, but I will say that I really found that title a lot of fun to read. It was a fun ride.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. I like the Batman. Definitely was not a letdown, which is good when you're investing in a character like that.
Yeah. And I also did reread Joshua Williamson's Justice League. The first time I read it, I didn't hate it. It was just, I wanted more of it, because they basically just dropped us in the middle of a story. And I think that that is one of the weaknesses that a lot of the Future State titles had. I saw it in Green Lantern. I saw it in Teen Titans. Basically, they're dropping you in the middle of a story that's taking place, and we don't really know what's happened. Like, we want backstory. We want some character development. And I think the big weakness right now for Future State is, how are you going to cram all of what the fans are at this point in time asking for? Because the book sold. The first week of Future State, some of those books had to go into second prints because the speculation, like you said, was so high, the comic stores were not ordering as many issues. And people bought them, whether they were just going into it expecting to hate it, going into it expecting to love it, or basically where I think I fell was, okay, this doesn't seem so bad, but I kind of want to see what this is all about, regardless of how I feel in the end.
So my question to you is, I know Infinite Frontier, which we're going to discuss later on, is coming after this, but what happens to the Future State characters?
Once again, they're keeping this really on the down low. I mean, I remembered listening to an interview Joshua Williamson had with someone in the YouTube community. I can't remember the name of the channel, but he was basically saying, there's so many things that I want to tell you, but I can't. So the truth is, we really don't know, but we're getting a couple of inklings right now in regards to what some of the new titles are after Future State. I mean, obviously, we're going to see more of Yara Flor. We're obviously going to see Red X make an appearance as well. We're going to see John Stewart basically become the driving focal point of the new Green Lantern title when it comes out, and it's going to be written by Jeff Thorne. Unfortunately, that I think was one of the bigger letdowns for me in Future State. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with Brian Michael Bendis writing Justice League, because of all of the negative talk that we heard about him from the Superman titles. Obviously, John Kent is going to get some more stories. And also, the next Batman is going to get his own comic too. So clearly, they want some of these characters to stick. I think the fans are a little bit more curious as to, is what's going to happen after Future State really going to lead up to the events of Future State? Or are there going to be people just grabbing their own destinies and saying, we're going to go in a different direction so it doesn't have to get to this point?
So something I'm unclear on is, are they in the same, I know they're in the same universe, but are they in the same timeline, or it's a different timeline between Future State and the regular DC timeline?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because after Dark Knight's death metal and the events of Future State, Infinite Frontier, the statement that they're basically saying is everything, regardless of where it falls, whatever continuity it is in, no matter what, it's all going to count. So I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or if they're going to be shooting themselves in the foot. But unfortunately, we really can't decide what directions we're going to go in as readers for at least another month.
I mean, I could tell you Marvel has been very successful with all these different universes they created. So I think DC's taking a page from their book.
Well, I mean, at the same time, we also have to remember that DC did do Crisis on Infinite Earth. So when it comes to multiverses, it really is Marvel stealing from DC and then DC basically stealing it back from Marvel, if you really look at the big picture in comics history. So in regards to some of the titles that you read from Future State, were there any of them that you did not expect to be as good as they were?
I didn't set my expectations too high on the titles. Like I said, I only read 3. It was The Next Batman, Yara Flor, and Teen Titans. So they were good to okay. So
Okay.
I wasn't let down by any of the books. The only letdown and drawback I had was that additional Batman story, which I did not like.
Gotcha. Well,
what about yourself as far as the titles?
Shazam. Shazam was the biggest surprise because I never would have read this issue if I didn't read Teen Titans. Teen Titans was not on my list of books to buy, but then of course, you know, when you find out that, oh, Red X, big name, you know, people are going to love it. This book is going to skyrocket. And of course, I saved myself a copy at my store. And literally the day I came in, the guy who runs my store says, I'm glad to know that you like to pull these books a couple of days before they go on the market, because we never even got any copies of Teen Titans 1 to the rack. That's how hot that book was, which is insane. But they basically were saying that Shazam was running in continuity with the Teen Titans story. And quite frankly, I like this story better than the Teen Titans story. And I also think that Shazam, you know, he's a character that people are now liking and appreciating a little bit more because clearly the movie came out and the movie was really, really fun.
But, I like the movie.
Oh, yeah, I thought the movie was great. Zachary Levi is fantastic as Shazam. I'm also a big fan of all the DC movies. You know, say what you want about them. That's entirely your opinion, no problem. But, yeah, I was very impressed with it. Let's just say that I'm looking forward to seeing how Future State ends based on the titles that I read. And the only thing that I'm hoping for is that they all end well. That's all that I'm hoping for. Now, speaking about overhype, there was a certain comic book that you told me about, and I didn't even know about it. Honestly, I really didn't care, to be honest with you. But when I started to do some research about it right after you reached out to me telling me it's coming out, I was like saying, okay, what can I do? The collector in me, the speculator in me is saying you may be missing the boat if you're not careful. Want to talk about this Star Wars High Republic, sir? See, you got the second printing?
Yeah, I wasn't able to get the first print. Well, let me tell you why there was so much hype about the book. Before the book came out, there were rumors that Disney Plus is already looking to make a series, an animated series out of the High Republic. So anything Disney Plus does automatically skyrockets a book, even before it comes out. Secondly, you had all these first appearances. So the first appearance of Keeve Trennis, a Jedi Padawan.
Correct.
First full appearance of Avar Kriss, a Jedi Master, and first appearance of Skier, another Jedi Master. Avar Kriss, I know, made an appearance in Kylo Ren, The Rise of Kylo Ren series. So that book also skyrocketed. So you had all this hype. You're getting new characters. You're getting possible Disney Plus show. You're getting Star Wars lore and canon, which is before. This is supposedly supposed to take place before everything you have in the Star Wars cinematic universe.
Exactly. Well, look, I gotta say this, and I've been saying this for a while now. You know, I still remember. I mean, look, I'm even wearing a Star Wars shirt right now just because we were going to talk about it today. But the truth of the matter is, when I was growing up, You know, Star Wars to me was like one of the greatest things ever. It was fun, it was entertaining, great characters. I loved the lightsaber battles. I still will not deny the fact that I do like the prequel trilogy. I mean, I saw The Phantom Menace in theaters 4 times. That is the most I've ever actually gone to see a movie in general. But, you know, I was a little bit iffy when all of a sudden, you know, George Lucas leaves, Kathleen Kennedy takes over, and she says, oh, we're going to start making a brand new sequel trilogy for Star Wars. So episodes 7, 8, and 9 are coming. So I'm like, oh, all right. I mean, that was my exact reaction. And then when they officially started saying, okay, everything that you know in the comic books, in the novels, throw that out the window. They're no longer canon except for Grand Admiral Thrawn, who they knew that if they didn't make him canon, the fans were going to crucify these people. So they ended up bringing him to the Star Wars Rebels cartoon, rightfully so, because he was there pretty much from the very beginning of the creation of the Galactic Empire. But when they basically said that, my heart sank a little bit, and I'm like, what the hell are they going to do? And Force Awakens, you know, it's fun. You know, it was cool to see Harrison Ford back. It was good to see Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher back. But then The Last Jedi hits theaters. And that was the very first time that I walked out of a Star Wars movie. Granted, I saw all 3 of the prequel trilogy films in theaters more than once each. And I will say that the worst movie out of all of them is still Attack of the Clones, because the problem with George Lucas is he's a great storyteller, but he can't write dialogue if his life depended on it. He's terrible at that. That's his biggest weakness. But after The Last Jedi, I just said to my wife, I don't think I want to see this movie in theaters again. For me to actually reject seeing a Star Wars movie in theaters is like heresy. And when I went to see The Rise of Skywalker, you know, I would say that J.J. Abrams redeemed it, but it was too little too late.
There was also, I forgot to mention, a lot of hype off the heels of Mandalorian.
Right.
Which was, I saw the show, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was better than a lot of the Star Wars movies. But I don't know if you're following the prices of Star Wars comics overall. Key first appearances are going up because of Mandalorian and because of Star Wars lore. So all that contributed, I think, also to the hype of the book.
Well, you know, the funny thing is right now with Star Wars is there's 2 camps. There's the Kathleen Kennedy camp, and then there's the Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau camp. Now, everything that Filoni and Favreau touch when it comes to Star Wars turns to gold. Okay? Clone Wars and Rebels, 2 excellent Star Wars animated shows. The Mandalorian, even though I don't have Disney Plus, so I'm not watching it, and also, I will say this for the umpteenth time, whether it's off camera or on camera, the fact that Disney has still not brought The Mandalorian Season 1 to Blu-ray/DVD is such a stupid mistake. They really need to make that in physical media, because if they're so down in the dumps with their money issues right now because of COVID, you have no idea how much money they can make for people just picking up those physical media items. But the fact that they're basically backing people into a corner and saying, if you want to watch these Star Wars shows, if you want to watch these MCU shows, you have to buy our product, and by buy I mean basically rent our product, you'll never own it. I think that that is a terrible mistake, and it's the only reason why I still keep hating on Star Wars right now, because I don't appreciate the direction that Kathleen Kennedy's side is going in, because they're pushing an agenda that I don't agree with. They're basically taking all of what Star Wars was and basically saying this is not what Star Wars is going to be anymore. And whenever a fan, a true fan, talks about how Star Wars is being ruined by this movement, they call you a bigot. And the funny thing is, I could put money on this, the people who complain about the fact that the fans are angry about this, I'm pretty certain that these people are not even watching any show or reading any book or any comic for that matter. I mean, for crying out loud, stores across the country still couldn't sell Rose Tico dolls, even if they tried.
Not for nothing. Let's circle back to the comic.
The comic is crap. End of story.
I didn't like it. Let me tell you why. I think when you're coming out with a number one, especially something hyped and especially something like Star Wars, you got to have a good comic. You got to have a good story. There was nothing in the story. I just, from start to finish, it was not anything interesting that kept my attention.
You're absolutely right. It was a boring story. I mean, I loved how they strategically place Yoda 2/3 into the book and say, oh, look, here's the nostalgia. Enjoy the nostalgia. I mean, they tried to do that with me in The Last Jedi when the spirit of Yoda shows up to talk to Luke. Oh, they almost got me. They almost grabbed me back, but they didn't. They failed tremendously. And the book is a snooze fest. Even that.
Look, he's on the cover of the second print. The little guy right over there.
Yep, there he is. Absolutely. I did, however, like the fact that they did remove a lot of his wrinkles. They tried to make people know, Yoda's alive, but he's much younger. He's like maybe 100 years old by then. Who knows? There was nothing new or interesting besides the rainbow of creatures, human and non, that were in that book. That's all that you could say was new. And I don't know what's going on because I'm hearing about it in these Star Wars books and I'm seeing it even in these X-Men books. What is it suddenly in Marvel with all of these big enemies being plants? Are they seriously trying to push a global warming initiative around here? I mean, seriously. I'm seeing it. I can see it. The writing's on the wall. That agenda's there. You can tell. It's all about the plants now. They want the entire world to go vegan.
Maybe they're pushing climate change. I don't know.
I don't know what it is, but but that's the impression that I'm getting. I'm not getting good stories. And the funny thing is, I was listening to all of these talking heads on YouTube talking about how bad this New Republic storyline is going to be. And they were talking about those plants. And they were talking about how they're the most deadliest of enemies that the Star Wars world is ever going to face. And the fact that they are a collective hive mind. And everyone's saying, oh, wow. It was like, this is something that Star Wars fans or people in science fiction are never going to see before. I'm like, yeah, it was great the first time we saw it when it was called the Borg and it was in Star Trek. That's what I'm hearing everywhere. I mean, look, I did watch Bill over at Comic Book University. He talked about this book. He liked it. And you know what? I'm glad that he did. I'm glad to know that someone out there liked it. But he basically said, grab this book just because of the speculators yelling about it, I mean, even if this book never sells another copy, even if the sales plummet before issue 5 comes out and they decide to discontinue the book, then it only means that more copies were never sold and this book is probably going to be a rarity, which means the value may go up. Because what people need to understand is whether a book is good or whether a book is bad in the world of comics, if it's rare out there in the open market, it's going to be building up value in the time. You just got to wait for it.
Well, it's not only that it has to be rare, it has to be interconnected with a, right now, movie or TV show.
Yeah.
That's what drives comic prices now.
Which I personally, as a fan and a reader, am not on board with at all. I want to just read a good story and just enjoy it. I mean, you reminded me of a really funny story. When Andy and I were actually at a comic book store, I was chatting with the guy and I was telling him about some of the comics that I had. And I even told him that I had a copy thanks to a friend of mine in high school. I have a copy of X-Factor 6, the first appearance of Apocalypse. And he was telling me about how when X-Men Apocalypse was being talked about, oh my God, the first appearance of Apocalypse, the prices and the speculators were going bonkers over these issues. And then the movie came out and it sucked and the numbers went right back down to where they were before they went up.
Yeah, that's the stupidity of a movie driving the price of a comic up and down.
Yeah, but the last thing I want to say about Star Wars before we move on is, as a guy who's now approaching his 40s, who had thankfully to his YouTube channel took a little bit of time every single month to watch some of these movies that I always knew as a film appreciator were good, but never got around to watching them. Well, I finally had the ability and the incentive to watch them. So I finally watched all of these incredible films from the golden age of Hollywood, from the 1930s all the way to the late 1960s. And I even saw some silent movies from the 1920s. And I got to tell you, movies today are nothing compared to movies of the past. I mean, I could say to people now, if you ask me what are my 25 favorite films of all time, half of those are going to be movies that were made before 1970. I mean, look, my favorite film of all time is always going to be Back to the Future, and that means all three of them, but that's just because it's one of the greatest, most creative stories of all time, and Marty McFly is the greatest film character of all time, and I stick to that. So anyway, the next topic that I want to get into is going into the world of Marvel, but the interesting thing is we're going to talk about some rebirth of some characters that we actually had not seen in comics for a long, long time. And thanks to some very famous and popular creative minds, we got them back starting in the late portion of 2019 and going up to right where we are right now. And I think we will talk about Donny Cates again, because Daniel, you are the Donny Cates guru on this group right here. And he has brought Thor back in full force. Now, not just Thor. This time around, he's in the middle of a really interesting story called Prey. It's a total of 5 issues, I believe. And he's brought back for the very first time in decades Thor's alter human ego, Dr. Donald Blake.
Now, for people who don't know Donald Blake, Thor's father, Odin, created him when he banished Thor. And Donald Blake took his place. After Thor got his mantle back as Thor, Donald Blake was banished to some other world. And only until Donny Cates brought him back was he able to break out. Now you see the interesting thing, how he interacts with Jane Foster. He is as powerful, even more powerful than Thor, which you wouldn't think. But
Absolutely.
He was created by Odin himself. So obviously he was, I guess you could say, kind of like a clone.
Maybe. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, but yeah. So he made his first appearance in a long time in Thor issue number 9. See, there he is right there. And actually, I'm pretty sure that unless you were someone who knew about Thor in comic books, when you watch the very first Thor movie, there is a scene in the movie where he has to pretend that he's someone else and he wears a doctor's outfit and the card says Dr. Donald Blake. I loved that. That was something that I applauded because I'm like, oh, there you go. There's the tip-off to the comic book fan.
Well, I didn't bring my Donald Blake. I brought Thor number 5, the Black Winter.
Oh, yes, yes.
I know the speculator community was majorly let down, but you have to remember, if you go back to Null in Venom 3, when Venom defeated him later on, he took a large break, and then he came back full force, and now he's fighting the entire Marvel Universe.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you're upset about the Black Winter, I believe he's going to be back at some point, either in Thor or in a different story, a different comic book storyline.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm really liking what he's doing with Donald Blake. I mean, I didn't actually know that whole other side to the creation of Donald Blake. So I don't know if that was something that Stan Lee had actually done when Thor was first introduced. I mean, I always wondered it was just like, him disguising himself like a Bruce Wayne or a Clark Kent. But what I love so much about Donny Cates, and I will say, like, I'm not his biggest fan compared to someone like you did. I know that you love his work. He's good, but there are some that I would definitely put above him. But I just really like how he is creating these great stories. At the same time, he's putting a lot of horror and supernatural into his stories. He's doing that a great deal with Venom. He's doing that a great deal with Thor as well. Like, he's really trying to make things scary, because I will tell you, when Donald Blake loses himself and breaks that cane, the way he looks right now, he's terrifying.
Well, Donny Cates is also like a master at retconning characters.
That's
and,
true.
You know, changing them, making them scarier, making them more interesting. So I think he also has that going for him as well.
Right. I mean, I actually had to reread the first 2 issues of Prey before I actually read 3 again, because I just wanted to catch myself up on it. No, it's a very cool story. I mean, it is so interesting, especially when you see a character who finds out the true world after living in it with rose-colored glasses for such a long time, and it could either cause someone to go in that direction, or it could be someone that just like says, hey, whatever, you know what, I'll learn to live with it, you know? But obviously in the world of comics, you can't go in that second direction. You got to go in the other one, otherwise there would be no story. But the other character that I want to talk about is the Hulk, but not just the Hulk. I want to talk about the version of the Hulk that was actually created in the 90s by Peter David. He made this 2-part comic book story called Future Imperfect, and it was basically where Hulk time travels into the distant future, and he finds himself older, but he's not the same person. He is going under the alias of the Maestro. He is a tyrant. He is a womanizer. He's an enslaver of innocent people. And basically, Hulk of our time takes him down. So all of a sudden, last summer, this comic book comes out. Again, a book I had no interest in purchasing at all. But you seem to be very interested in it. So obviously when friends talk, you know, friends listen. And I decided to just say, okay, I'll try it. And I got to tell you, book number 1, I was hooked. And I read all 5 of Maestro. It was also great to know that Peter David came back to write this 5-issue miniseries. I thought that this was filled with fun action. It had some laughable moments, but it was basically how we learned how the Maestro became the Maestro. And I liked that.
See, it's a number 1. It hooks you in, gives you backstory, interesting story. Unfortunately, I do own it, but unfortunately, I haven't read it because I have so much I want to read, but a limited amount of time, you know?
Now, I got to tell you, I don't think it would be so difficult for you to hunt the other 4 issues down, but it really is great to know that Peter David got this opportunity, because after actually getting my hands on Future Imperfect, I still cannot get over the price I paid for both issues, because some of those prices that you see for just one of the 2 on eBay is pretty bad. Like, I think issue 1 or 2 could be on eBay for like $30, but the fact that I actually got both issues for under $30, that was a great deal. And when you find those great deals, you just got to grab them. But I had so much interest in Maestro thanks to that miniseries that I had to see how the original story was written. It's beautifully written. It's beautifully drawn. It's a great story. And they put so much into 2 issues, but it's overly satisfying. And that's another reason why I really like the concept of these mini series, because you don't need an ongoing series to tell a story like Maestro. Although the funny thing is, with Maestro ending at the end of 2020, we just had the continuing miniseries begin, Maestro War and Pax. Once again, Peter David's writing it, and it's only 1 issue in, and I loved the issue. The ending features a really big surprise, and I'm really curious to see where this 5-part series is going to go. Will it be the end? I don't know, but you know something, Daniel? If Peter David is asked to write more of these Maestro miniseries, and Warren Pax ends up being just as fun and good as the original Maestro miniseries, I'm going to buy the next one. I want more of this. It's fun.
Having read all that, would you say the original one is better than the new series, or vice versa?
there's no better or worse in regards to these Maestro stories. A Future Imperfect is great. You just got to look at all of these right now as a complete package. Because obviously, we found Hulk encounter the Maestro in the original story. We then got Maestro, so we learned how he officially became the Maestro. And now it's a matter of him as the Maestro developing his new kingdom, if you will, and how many faces out there want to take him down. And the question is, at the end of Maestro War and Pax, will they succeed, or will the Maestro still be there? I mean, now, if they're going to base it on the continuity of the original Future Imperfect, my guess is he's going to survive. But I'm wondering what will happen after War and Pax. Like I said, will there be more issues? Like, will they actually make a Maestro miniseries in which we actually get to the point where the Future Imperfect storyline actually starts? That would be really cool. And then at the end, he could say, "That's it for Maestro. Now go read Future Imperfect." But I can only say so much. It's such a fun read. Maestro is great, and Peter David is just breathing new life once again into this version of Hulk that he created. And I am very much enjoying it a lot. And the funny thing is, not that many people in the comic book community over here on YouTube are really talking about it, but when you go into some of these live chats, when they're doing these live chats, and you ask if you read Maestro War and Pax, you'll get like 5 to 10 people saying, "I read it, it's awesome, I read it, I loved it." So people are reading it. So there's definitely something there. It's just not many people are talking about it. That's why I wanted to take this initiative and talk about it.
Maybe I'll take you up on that.
Well, listen, you've recommended things to me, and outside of Star Wars The High Republic, I would definitely say that you have not been wrong on many things. But then again, I'm not even going to say that you were wrong on High Republic. We just went in as speculators, and we tried it out. We should both at least agree to say that we're not going to buy any more issues.
I think I'm going to get 2 and 3.
Really?
Even though I didn't like it.
What? Why? Are you just going to hope that something gets better?
I don't think anything's going to get better. I'm pure speculation buy.
Okay. Well, look, if it ends up being good, just let me know. I don't think I'll follow you, but I will
definitely let you know.
I'll be glad to know that it redeemed itself, because I'm not interested in any of the novels, and I'm not even interested in any of the IDW titles. I mean, I think one of them is coming out this week, but it's definitely not on my buy list.
Yeah, we seem to be talking a lot about a book that we don't like.
Well, something, that's a normal thing. I mean, come on, you know how many people out there hate The Last Jedi, but all they do is talk about it?
Yeah, I wish we spend more time on the books we like than that, but...
Well, let's do that then. Let's get into the next topic. And I just want to say to everybody out there that when it comes to this next topic, this is only a surface that is being scratched today, because this topic is going to be in a bunch of our videos this year, and there's no reason why it shouldn't. And that is, once again, we're going to be talking about some indie books, because clearly we took a look at some DC and some Marvel, and there were hits and misses. But one of the few things that I am definitely thinking about, and let's face it, I'm speculating here, there's something about the indie market specifically this year. I think that we're going to see a game-changing event that we haven't seen. And if it's not in 2021, I have a very good feeling it's going to be in 2022. But I think we're going to be seeing a massive game-changing event that we have not seen since the forming of Image Comics in 1991. I'm telling you, man, the indie market right now is hugely popular right now, and it's gaining ground on the big two.
Well, you have the huge, successful writers. You have Donny Cates. You have Chip Zdarsky. You have James Tynion. Kind of reminds me back in the day when they formed Image Comics. You had McFarlane, Jim Lee, Eric Larson, Mark Silvestri,
Rob Liefeld.
That's kind of like it's gone full circle, I think, since the 90s.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest bomb that was dropped right before the end of 2020 was the fact that Jeff Johns and Gary Frank announced that their next big book is not a DC book. It's an Image book, and it's coming out in April called Geiger. I'm telling you, I'm excited for it, man. And I mean, think about it this way. We've got a big drop coming at the end of February. Berserker is coming out from Boom Studios, which is another company that a lot of people are talking about right now. They're saying that it's really creeping up behind Image, and they say that it could have the potential to even beat Image in regards to sales, especially with the two monster deals they just landed last week by doing a book deal with Wizards of the Coast and with Hasbro, leaving IDW in the dust.
And I believe they have a network deal with streaming, I think it's Netflix, one of the streaming services. Not sure.
But I mean, think about it this way. Let's go back to Berserker. I mean, we'll go into more details with it after the book comes out. But the big thing about this book, when it first got announced, was the fact that Keanu Reeves, John Wick himself, was attached to this book. He's a co-creator. The fact that he went to an indie company to get his book done, and not to Marvel, and not to DC, says a lot about the market today.
Well, why do you think that is?
I think it's because of the same reasons as to why Image Comics and Valiant Comics were created in the 1990s. It's the fact that these creators were feeling bogged down because of the fact that they realized that it wasn't a comic book company that they were working for. They were working for a corporation. This was a business that decided to suck all the life out of what it meant to be a comic book creator. Now, unfortunately, when you officially create a comic company like they did when they made Image Comics, eventually that business mentality has to come into play in order to keep your business afloat. But take a look at Todd McFarlane. You know, he has a toy company. He's still writing and creating Spawn comics, but he's doing this because he still loves it. I mean, I remembered something that I heard. I saw an interview with him, and he was basically saying, whenever I was in a meeting talking about a new toy that I was going to make, that was a time frame where I should be in the studio drawing and writing. Like, it just shows you that he still loves it. It's the fact that Eric Larson is still writing and drawing the Savage Dragon, and he won't stop until he just wants to retire. That's passion. That's creativity. That's why I feel these companies are starting to gain so much more ground, because Marvel and DC are truly showing their corporate ugly heads right now in more ways than one.
I believe also that they're creator-owned titles.
Exactly.
The independent companies, which gives the writers and artists incentives to choose them over Marvel and DC, where Marvel and DC are going to say, you got to write what's good for our company instead of writing what you want to write.
Absolutely. And that's where the downfall is. So one of the few things that was very interesting about January was the fact that we sort of had a little bit of sadness because some really great stories, I don't know if they're going to continue, but they technically did come to an end. One of them is not done just yet. One of them is actually ending in February, but it's coming to an end. And I really want to talk about them. One of them is, of course, written by Chip Zdarsky. I talked about this briefly in the pilot episode, but he's writing this excellent comic for Image called Stillwater. In February, issue number 6 is going to be the last part of the first story arc. I don't know if he's going to continue it, but this is one of my favorite reads of the last couple of months. Every single time a new issue came out, I was just so excited to read it, and I almost let this one pass me by.
I read issue number 1. That was the only issue I was able to buy. My store doesn't really carry so many indie titles, but horror genre, which is hot. It's a really good read. And a good surprise at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Issue 1.
And he's definitely going to be diving back into some horror elements in the coming months. I know he's got another indie miniseries title coming out in April called The Silver Coin. I'm very excited to read that one. Another one, I would not have known about this unless my local comic book store didn't tell me about it. It's called We Only Find Them When They're Dead. It's from Boom Studios. It's written by Al Ewing, who is currently writing The Immortal Hulk and just started the brand new X-book Sword. But this was just your classic science fiction with definitely an anime twist. I love the color palette. The story is beautiful. And also, what I really, really like about this story is they focus on a diverse cast. The captain is actually gay. He has one of his crew members as his partner. There are a lot of different backgrounds and colors, but the fact that the story is brilliant, that's where people will not complain about your diversity in your books. You've just got to focus on giving us a good story, and nobody's going to care about the diversity of your cast. They'll embrace it no matter what you do. Just give them a good story. We Only Find Them When They're Dead is a great story. Al Ewing did a phenomenal job. It's a shame that it just finished, but they're saying that it's the end of book 1. They're saying that he has a 12-book deal. So who knows if there's going to be more. But I will say, after reading these 5 issues, when he makes another one, I will buy it. I will read it. I'm excited.
Have all 5, haven't read it. Anyway, I'm bringing up the next one, and I know you probably have it on your list.
Oh, man. Oh, boy. Ugh.
It's from J. Maxwell Prince, same creator of Ice Cream Man. One shot about clowns. It's a 6-issue miniseries. Each issue is going to have a different story about different clowns. So I read Haha number 1. I thought the story was very unique. It was a great story. And then I come to the end, and I call you up. I said, what the hell kind of ending is that? And you say to me, what'd you say?
Well, first of all...
Well, you got to make up your own ending. I said, why would I want to read a book like that?
Well, you see...
I thought it over a lot. I'm sorry for interrupting, but...
No, don't worry about it.
After, thinking it over, I said, you know what? That's pretty unique, because you don't see that nowadays in comics.
Yeah, and I'm just so glad that you brought that up, because the other thing about the fact that there may be some things that are ending right now in regards to the indies, but there's some great beginnings, and Haha number 1 is one of them. I mean, again, I saw that the comic was coming out. I don't know why I even thought about not even caring, but once again, I see Bill over at Comic Book University review this comic, and he basically said, I don't care how much money you spend. I don't care how long it takes you to hunt this issue down. He said, don't let this issue pass you by. And I've watched a lot of his reviews. He's one of the better reviewers out there because he tells it like it is, and he's honest. I appreciate honesty. He and a lot of the people who I follow out there in the comic book community, they're all honest, decent people, whether they love a book or they hate a book.
I also told you to get that.
You did. Because I still remember seeing some of the title of Ice Cream Man, and I was like, what the hell is Ice Cream Man? Like, I never even knew about this issue. It's like, what is it? Because no one says much about it. But if it wasn't for that review, I would have probably just forgot about it. But I hunted it down. Thank God my comic book store managed to get some more copies in. And I will say that, I've got my copy right here. I'll hold mine up because I love this story. In its simplicity in its finest form, it is one of the most heartbreaking but most beautiful stories that I have read in comics ever. Let me repeat that, people. Ever. I have never read a book like this before in the world of comics. I almost cried when I got to the end of this book. This is my favorite read so far in 2021, and that says a lot. But getting back to what you were saying, when you asked me that, I'm like, think about what's going on in the world of entertainment these days, Dan. Think about all these great movies that come out, and they end. and you're satisfied. But then all of a sudden there's a sequel, and there's another sequel, and another sequel, and then a TV spinoff. You know, it's like, why can't they just end it? You know, even if you end on a cliffhanger, people don't hate a cliffhanger ending if there's no intentions for another piece of the story. The point of those types of books and those types of endings is to leave it up to the reader's imagination. Let the reader write the ending. Look at Harry Potter, regardless of how you feel about J.K. Rowling these days. What she gave us was a game changer when it came to people reading books. And the Deathly Hallows was an excellent ending. But the question is, what if you didn't get that epilogue? Clearly, the epilogue was written for the fans, so they wouldn't be upset. But what, of course, happens even after that epilogue is written? The fans scream, "We want more. Give us more." So she did. She gave them a Broadway play called The Cursed Child, and she gave them a brand new franchise called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And apparently, they're upset. They're saying, "Why'd you give us more? You freaking asked for more! So stop it!" That's the point I'm trying to make. You've got to let sleeping dogs lie. Sometimes, if anything. If you don't, this is what your end product is going to be.
Well, do you think the rest of the haha issues are going to follow the same format?
You see, that's the funny thing. I don't know, because I've already seen a preview of what issues 2 and 3 look like. And it's definitely very different from issue number 1. Very different. I think like issue 3 is going to be about a mime, which makes me wonder, because now I actually have been reading a lot of comics for the last couple of years, and now I know the concept of the silent issue. I never heard of that term until I started reading a lot again. And if you don't know what a silent issue is, everyone who is watching, that's just a comic book with tons of pictures and no words. That's a silent issue. So the fact that issue number 3 is going to be about a mime, does that mean that it's going to be a silent issue? Kind of hoping that it is, because
maybe the mime will talk at the end.
Maybe, because that would be a really interesting way to do it. But I like the fact that, again, it's a mini series. It's 6 individual stories about people who are clowns as career paths. Neither story is going to connect. You know I mentioned Chip Zdarsky's The Silver Coin that's coming out in April. It's going to be a very similar way of telling the story, but the difference is the concept of the silver coin goes throughout the miniseries. This series, 6 stories, all different, non-connecting. But I will just say this. I don't know what the rest of them are going to be, but I'm wondering if they're actually going to beat issue 1, because issue 1 was beautiful.
Well, you may be surprised.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the beauty of getting all these books. You never know what you're going to get out of them. So the last thing that I want to talk about in regards to the indies is this is one that actually falls in the middle. It's a story that ends, and it's also a story that's about to begin again. And that, of course, is a book that I know that Daniel and I are enjoying, and that is James Tynens' Department of Truth. Now, this came out last year. We already discussed this in the last episode. There's movie rights in the works right now. I love this book. I absolutely love this book. I was not really sure about it after issue 3, because I think issue 3 was the weakest, but the first story arc just ended, and issue number 5 was incredible. Let's just say that I am hooked. I'm interested in the main character, Cole. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen to him, because the story arc is ending, and the next story arc is not going to happen until issue number 8. So there's going to be 2 months where we're not going to see these characters that we've been following for the last 5 issues. However, to fill in that gap, issues 6 and 7 are going to be about the origins of the Department of Truth. So I'm very interested to see how it's going to be through time, because I think it's going to start in the 16th century. So I'm really curious to see where it's going to go. But I will say, you know, James Tynan is doing wonders with Batman. I mean, say what people want to say about Joker War. Look, I liked it. I had a good time with Joker War. And I know that you like Something is Killing the Children. I think that, you know, he's going to these indie companies because look at these stories that he's writing when he's not working for DC Comics.
I read somewhere that he has a deal where he could write only 3 indie titles in his contract, DC contract.
So he's only writing 2 at the moment? Does he have a third?
Not that I know of, but he'll probably come up with one.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you.
And for people who don't know, Department of Truth takes famous conspiracy theories and explains them in a different way.
Yeah, it's basically about an organization that is following people who are creating conspiracy theories and also even taking some conspiracy theories that may in fact be true, but they're trying to prevent the mainstream world from knowing that they actually are true, or that there are people out there that are trying to make them true. So the other thing is, if you're also a fan of politics, this is also a great book for you. I sold 2 of my friends who joined me on my other show over here, The Old, the New, and the Awesome, my friends Stacy and Cammie. They eat this shit up. So they are very excited. They're actually looking for this book. Yeah, I'm very excited, especially for February and even going into March. I think that we're going to be getting some amazing stories. And the best part is they're not going to come from the big 2. I actually just discovered another one that's coming out, I believe, at the end of February, that I am definitely interested in picking up. It's called Nuclear Family. It looks so interesting. It's about what if the Cold War actually did in fact blow over and the bomb was actually dropped on the United States. That just sounds so cool.
That sounds cool.
Yeah,
I guess February is indie month, right?
Oh,
I mean,
totally. March. You know what? As far as I'm concerned, 2021 is indie all around. You know, it's also great when I go to my wife and I tell her about some of these interesting stories. I mean, Nuclear Family that I just mentioned is actually loosely based on a Philip K. Dick short story. So that's also a big plus for me. But when I tell my wife some of these stories, especially the ones that take place in historic periods of time, like I know I mentioned to you Two Moons, which takes place during the Civil War. Very interesting story, it sounds like. This one, which takes place in the 1950s, very interesting. I'm just excited for some of these very creative stories. I'm really curious to see where they're going to go. So I also want to say thank you to Daniel, because we're going to be starting up a brand new segment over here on our show today that is called Quick Bits, before we officially show the preview for the next episode. And what this is we're going to basically just go back and forth, and we're going to talk about something that we definitely want to share with you. And whether one of us wants to also give our feedback on it, that's entirely up to us. So Daniel, this is your baby. What have you got for us on our first Quick Bits today?
All right, I'm going to do my best read of the month. It would be Shawn Murphy, Batman, Curse of the White Knight. I also read the previous title is Batman White Knight. Now, it's a DC Black Label, and I don't know if people are familiar with DC Black Label. It's a more adult type content than regular DC titles. Additionally, I know Shawn Murphy has a third title that's currently out. It's White Knight, Harley Quinn.
Yes, and some people really like it.
I haven't, after reading those 2, I would definitely pick up the series. And what's interesting about this is it's somewhat of an alternate story to Batman, where the Joker becomes good.
Oh.
And he takes the mantle of Jack Napier, and Jack Napier says all the problems in Gotham was not because of the Joker, it's because of Batman. And the whole story, being White Knight and Curse of the White Knight, has to do with Jack Napier and his relationship with Batman, as well as the Joker and his relationship with Batman. how they're codependent and like they can't exist without each other. Pretty cool. So it's a good read. Definitely recommend it.
Well, that's been correct me if I'm wrong, but that's always been the whole relationship between Batman and the Joker, no matter what side of the coin that they're on. Neither of them can live without the other. I mean, it goes back to that great scene in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight where the great Heath Ledger, as Joker, goes to Batman and says, I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? And then he goes in that great way that made the theater laugh when I went to see it. You complete me. Like, that is just gold right there. But that's always been. But to see it on the flip is interesting. I've actually never read anything by Sean Murphy. What do you think of him as a writer, by the way?
Not only is he a writer, but he's the artist too.
Oh, very cool.
So he does both.
Oh, because
he's a very good writer, very fluid, not a boring story. Good different spin on characters, which is, classic Batman characters, Harley Quinn's in it, all the famous Batman villains. Really enjoy his writing.
That's really cool. I mean, I just watched an interview with him on another channel on YouTube, and he seemed like a really decent guy. So I don't know if I'll read the White Knight stories, but I will definitely keep his name on my radar for future work. I'll see what he does for us in the future. So what I want to bring to everybody's attention is I want to dive back into The King in Black, because The King in Black is still going on. The core story, I have to admit, I really didn't like issue number 3 as much as the previous 2, but I'm not out. I'm going to see this one to the very end. But we didn't really touch upon it the first go around, but there's a lot of tie-ins to this story. And the thing about the tie-ins is, do you have to read them? No. But if you find something there that interests you, don't be upset about giving it a try. And I want to feature the 2-issue tie-ins that have really been fun. I mean, like, they're not good. They're not the worst, but I enjoy them. I've been reading the Black Cat tie-in, and I've also just started reading the Savage Avengers tie-in. Black Cat is cool. A Black Cat is actually more connected to the core King in Black story than a lot of the tie-ins right now, because look, I've read a decent amount of them, like Symbiote Spider-Man and Gwenom versus Carnage, Planet of the Symbiotes, but Black Cat is just a fun heist story, and I was curious about it because they said that in the teasers, like, Felicia is going to steal something that Null wants badly. So, of course, I had to know, what did he want? And I wanted to see how she was going to steal it back. And just in case, I have no reason spoiling this because of the fact that it's been out for a month. But the thing that Null wants that Felicia/Black Cat has to get is Doctor Strange. I just think that that's really, really fun. And it's a fun comic. But the Savage Avengers, I wouldn't have picked up if Deadpool wasn't in it. So Deadpool's in this story, and it's just funny. Savage Avengers 17 made me laugh. And there's no reason to read it for the continuity of the core King in Black story. But it's funny. And that's what I always enjoy. As long as I can just put down a comic book and say, that was awesome, I had a good time with it, that makes it worth every penny. So I am very curious to see, because it's going to be a 3-part story. It goes from Savage Avengers 17 to 19. I'm going to read them all because I'm just having a good time.
I know initially when I spoke to you about the King of Black series, you're like, I'm not getting any of the tie-ins. You didn't say any. You said, I'll get like a couple. Mm-hmm. Turned out that you're getting a lot more. And I said to you, dude, why are you getting so many? You told me you weren't getting. And you're like, I get what I like.
Exactly.
So I like that about, that you're following your motto. You're getting what you like. You're not buying for speculation. You're just buying for reading purposes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, look, I even picked up the Deadpool tie-in, Deadpool issue number 10, which actually ended up being the last issue of the Deadpool title that was currently being written. it's funny. I laughed out loud while I was reading it because, look, I love Deadpool. It makes me kick my own butt knowing that I should have picked up a copy of New Mutants 98 when it was cheaper, but I didn't. But it was fun. And but you're absolutely right. Like, I am buying a lot of the tie-ins, but the funny thing is there's a lot more tie-ins that are coming out right now that I am not reading.
Just to segue on King in Black 3, if you read it, you know the ending. So this comic is related to that. It's the first full appearance of the Silver Surfer Black.
Right.
I promised my son I would show it.
And so, I'm very jealous that you have it.
I actually have multiple copies. Maybe we'll trade one day.
I don't know if I have anything to trade with you. If you give it to me for a good price, I'll give you money for it.
Well, maybe a birthday present.
Oh, that would be very
Then
sweet
I promised my son, speaking of symbiotes, we have Amazing Spider-Man 798, the Garone variant. This
very
is
cool.
the Norman Osborn announces himself as the Red Goblin, now bonded with the Carnage symbiote.
Oh, I love that story. That's the Dan Slott story?
Yes.
Yeah, Going Down Swinging was a great story. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
Honestly, why isn't the Red Goblin showing up in The King in Black? He is a symbiote.
I don't know. I mean, I know that Norman had a big tie-in in Absolute Carnage, which I did collect. I liked the Spider-Man story. And I also believe that he was partly in the core Absolute Carnage story. But yeah, you know something? It's kind of crazy because I know that Dan Slott is not really favorable these days, apparently. I don't know the whole story as to why, but I think that that Spider-Man story that he wrote is one of the best Spider-Man stories I ever read. Going Down Swinging is just great, and Red Goblin's a vicious character. You know, I mean, like, it's not like Norman Osborn was, you know, as kind as a kitten when he was the Green Goblin, but, oh man, it's like, he literally, you know, I don't even like Spinal Tap. I always use this reference. He literally took everything that Green Goblin was about when he got the Carnage symbiote in him and he turned it up to 11. That's what he did when he was the Red Goblin. And also, that is also one of my favorite Funko Pops. When they announced that they were going to make the Red Goblin as a Funko Pop, I was like, no way, I got to pick that up. But I never would have picked it up if I didn't read that story. I'm just going to say that right now. But yeah, I mean,
before you say anything else, I got to show this because I showed the other two for my son. So this is a lenticular Iron Man variant.
Oh, very cool.
So
is that a specific issue that I should know about?
I don't think it has any speculation value. Just a cool cover.
Okay. I mean, look, you're the reason why I own a copy of Iron Man 300 and Hulk 400. You gave me those copies, which was really kind of you. So that's pretty much going to wrap up our discussion today. It was definitely a lot of fun, but I'm really, really excited for our next episode because we're going to really be tackling the indie books and we're going to be talking about some more specific titles in detail. And again, Daniel, I don't know where you got this information, but I reached out to a whole bunch of my sources. The Last Ronin #2 is still coming out on February 17th.
Well, that's great news.
Let's keep any body part of ours that we can crossed until that date actually comes and that book is in our hands, because that's something we will be talking about very soon. But what I'm really excited to focus on, and unfortunately I don't have a copy of the book to show everybody just because it hasn't come out yet, but it is coming out on February 10th. We've been talking a lot about superheroes, but we're going to definitely be talking about a brand new title from Image called Radiant Black, because it's going to be an interesting reinvention of the superhero. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that we'll throw in some other great superhero stories that are from indies. Like, I know for a solid fact I will want to talk about Erratic because that's been such a fun read as well. But I'm just really excited to see something that has been done for so many years. Again, I said this before and I'll say it again, over 80 years worth of stories in the world of comic books. And there are these creators out there that are still trying to find ways to reinvent things that have been out for such a long period of time. And to see this interesting new take on the superhero in Radiant Black makes me very excited. The speculators market's really hyped about it, but I have a feeling this one's not going to disappoint like some other comics that we talked about today.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that one.
Well, that's going to wrap up another episode of That's Comical, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We had such a great time, and I am looking forward to seeing you all again in the next one. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, feel free to leave a comment. Also, feel free to subscribe if you want to be up to date with our latest videos. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Actions speak louder than words.